Well, thank you all so much for attending tonight. It really means a lot to us to have all of you take time out of your busy schedule and participate in our evening tonight and show an interest in the project and have your questions answered. So really, thank you again. So we have about a 30-minute presentation tonight. Our speakers are Bill Ashford, who's going to talk about the highway design and the bridge design. We have Jed Murrow, who's going to give you an overview on the environmental study that has been ongoing concurrently with the design. And then we have the overall project manager representing the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. That's Wendy Johnson. So we're going to ask that you hold questions until the end. I'm going to walk around with the mic so everyone can have the benefit of hearing you. And this is also being broadcast on community television right now, so that way anyone at home can clearly hear your question and then can benefit from the discussion that's going on tonight. Okay, so if you also, if you have any questions or comments that you think of tomorrow, or you share the information with your friends and neighbors and community groups, we would love to hear additional comments other than what we're hearing tonight. The way to do that is to go to the website. It's everett-turnpikewidening.com, and if you go through the contact page, your information will directly go to Wendy Johnson, the project manager. And so the public comment period and the efforts that we're making with the public, this is going to be ongoing for many more months. So please, if you think of additional items and you have questions and concerns, let us know, because all of your input makes the project better, and we want to be able to deliver the best project possible, and all of you know the community here the best. So thank you very much.
I'd just like to, again, thank everybody for coming. The idea here tonight is to give you a walkthrough of what the project is. So that's our overview. Why is DOT approaching this project? We're going to talk about the need. We're going to talk about the individual project segments. We're going to touch on the environmental study that's evaluating the impacts of this project. And we're going to talk about public outreach, cost, and then the anticipated schedule, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Right now, the project is in what we would call preliminary design, which is where we're evaluating the alternatives, the impact of those alternatives, and trying to choose the most reasonable and best fitting alternative. So where is this project? This is starting just north of Exit 8 in Nashua, and going all the way up the F.E. Everett Turnpike to the 293-101 interchange in Bedford. That is about a 12-mile stretch. Of that 12 miles, there are a couple segments that have been improved. That's from exit 10 to 11, and in the 13 area. Exit 13 is the new airport access road and where the bridges are. In this slide, you can see the 3 red areas, and those are the 3 segments that have not been approved that we're proposing to widen here. So we're taking those 3 segments, and we're going to go from a 2-lane section in each direction to a 3-lane section in each direction. Along in those 3 segments, there are 5 bridges that will be improved. 4 of the 5 are complete bridge replacements. 1 is minor maintenance and update of bridge rail. And then the important part here also is what is not a part of this project. This project does not deal with tolling at all. This is a capital improvement project for the Turnpike, and tolling is not addressed under capital projects. Furthermore, this is focusing on the main line of the roadway and not the interchanges along this section of road, so there are no changes to the exits. Any of the work along the roadway ties into the existing exit ramps. And last but not least, obviously we want to know the environmental impacts of the proposed construction. So there's an environmental study. All right, so why is this project being done? What is the need? We need to improve the mobility throughout this corridor. This section of roadway is one of only 2 north-south corridors in southern New Hampshire, and it sees a large amount of commuter traffic that is right now currently not operating as efficiently as it could be. So we're going to relieve the congestion. Currently, the roadway operates at what we would call a level of service D. With the projected traffic growth, that level of service is going to drop down to an F. And level of service is a qualitative measure of basically the flow of traffic on a road. And the ratings go from an A to an F. An A would be free flow, desired condition, and F is stop and go traffic, and obviously not the desired condition. All right, so the addition of a lane in each direction will relieve that congestion, but it would also improve safety because freer flowing roads have less accidents. As part of the expansion, we are also adding a paved high-speed shoulder, which allows for much better safety because people can pull off the road if they have an accident. And again, we're going to improve some of the bridges along the way. One of the bridges within the corridor is on the DOT's red list and needs to be replaced. Another one of the bridges on the corridor is not adequately designed to accommodate the 100-year flood or the flow of water that comes with that. All right, so our increased capacity in the 3 segments that we are going to be looking at improving. Currently, there's 2 lanes, 2 12-foot lanes in each direction with a shoulder on the slow speed side and only a 4-foot paved shoulder on the inside, or the high-speed side. With that, there is a grass median between northbound and southbound with a metal rail to protect from crossover crashes or such like that. The proposed condition, like I had mentioned, is going to add a lane. So you're going to have 3 lanes in each direction, keeping that 10-foot shoulder on the slow-speed side and creating a 12-foot shoulder on the high-speed side. Again, this is a tremendous safety improvement because it allows for people to get off the road if there is an accident or if there's an issue or break or anything. They don't have to be in that lane. They can't, with a 4-foot shoulder, you can't get off the road. So with that comes the metal railing will be replaced with a concrete barrier, and this is much more safety just because it will keep cars from crossing from one barrel to the next. All right, so I just want to touch on the 3 different segments that we're looking at. The southern segment is here, starts here in Nashua and runs to Merrimack. It's just north of exit 8 and runs about 1.3 miles to the north and just shy of the exit 10 area in Merrimack. The major bridge structure in this section is the Pennachuck Brook Bridge, and we're going to talk about that. So there's a picture of the Pennachuck Brook Bridge. Pennachuck Brook runs into Bowers Pond, or is part of Bowers Pond. That whole water system is part of Nashua's drinking water supply, and the planning that has been done so far and the construction alternatives that have been looked at so far do everything to protect this as a very top priority during construction. Here we see the same set of bridges for the existing Everett Turnpike over the Pennachuck Brook. Here you can see there's clearly 2 bridges. These 2 bridges are going to be replaced with 1 bridge that is 6 lanes wide to accommodate the 3 lanes in each direction. Construction is going to be done solely to the east side of these bridges, which will be the right as you're looking at this. What that does is allow all the construction to be done in one side, so you're minimizing the impact to the water body. It's all along one side. Another aspect of construction and what we've been looking at is that these 2 bridges are currently, I think, around 87-foot span. They're going to be replaced with the single 100-foot span bridge, which allows the abutments to be built outside of the existing abutments, so not in the water. Again, doing everything we can to try to minimize the impact to the waterway. One of the questions that came up last time is, well, how is this going to be built and what's the traffic going to be like? The commitment under building these bridges and all of the improvements that we're is to keep 2 lanes of traffic open at all high flow traffic. For the most part, there's going to be 2 lanes in each direction open at all times. The occasional lane closures, maybe during the middle of the day or evening, or possibly rolling roadblocks using state police when the construction does have to impact one of the lanes. But again, that'll only be done at low traffic volume times. Our middle segment here starts just right in the vicinity of exit 11 and goes 5.1 miles to just south of exit 13, which is the Bedford Tolls or Airport Access Road area. All right. There's 3 bridges in this section that are going to be replaced: Babusick Lake Road, Wire Road, and then the Turnpike over Babusick Brook. All right. Right, this is exit 11 area. Right in the beginning of this segment is the Turnpike over Greeley Street. This bridge here has already been built wide enough to accommodate a 3-lane section. So there's going to be very minor work on this bridge, just maintenance and upgrading of the bridge rails to meet the current safety. All right. Babusick Lake Road. Currently, this bridge is on the DOT's red list, which means that one or more of the major structural components of this bridge is rated poorly. So this bridge has needed work anyways, but it needs to be replaced to allow the new 6-lane section underneath this bridge. Right now, the current span is not long enough to allow 3 lanes in each direction underneath. Babusick Lake Road is a very heavily traveled local road, approximately 9,700 cars per day. Just to the east of this bridge are the Merrimack school systems, the police department, fire department, town hall, and I believe the court system, the court building is there. So there's a lot of facilities that the public need to access to the east of this bridge. So in order not to impede traffic in this area, well, we say that in construction always has some impact, but to have the least amount of impact possible, a temporary bridge is going to be built next to the existing bridge. So that'll be a 2-lane bridge to maintain the 2 lanes of traffic there at all times. And with that, once the temporary bridge is built, the existing bridge will be torn down and a new bridge will be built in its place. The next bridge up the Turnpike is Wire Road. Again, this Wire Road serves as a significant east-west connector for Merrimack to get across the Everett Turnpike. This has about half the amount of traffic with only 4,400 cars a day as Babusick. So what is being proposed here is the use of alternating one-way traffic, basically temporary stoplights placed at either side of the bridge to allow only one directional flow over this bridge during construction, I should say. So, like I said, we're going to maintain one directional flow over this bridge on the southern. That allows the northern half of this bridge to be torn down and a new bridge to be built as close as possible to the existing bridge while maintaining that one-way traffic. Right? This is done because you can sort of see in this slide here that Babusick Brook is very close to this bridge. So by taking this alternating one-way traffic approach, that minimizes any impacts to Babusick Brook as well as the abutters in this area. Just to the north of Wire Road is the F.E. Everett Turnpike over Babusick Brook. This is a very small bridge, just barely over culvert size. But in this area, the existing turnpike and this bridge do not meet the criteria for the 100-year flood design. So we are going to be looking at raising the F.E. Everett Turnpike approximately 3 feet to meet the 100-year flood standards, which would replace this bridge with a a larger opening to allow better flow and to handle any floods in this area, or flooding, I should say. All right. So one of the other major bridges in the middle segment is over the Sauhegan River. This is also known as the Merrill's Marauder Bridge. This was widened a few years back. There was deck repair and replacement and widened. So this bridge is significantly wide to handle the 3 lanes of traffic in each direction. So while there will be road work coming into this bridge and restriping across this bridge, there is really no work on this bridge itself. And that gets us to our last segment, the northern segment, which starts north of exit 13 and goes 1.3 miles to the north up to the 293-101 interchange. There are no major structure repairs on this segment. There are some major bridges. The new Everett, Route 3 over the Everett Turnpike. That was just built a couple years ago, but that is built with a large enough span to accommodate the 3-lane section underneath. And there is the 101 bridge over the Turnpike as well, but that also spans long enough to accommodate the 3-lane section. So again, the approach here is to add a 3rd lane in each direction, which will be carried all the way through the interchange. And we are not reconfiguring this interchange. So as you can see in this graphic, that we're tying into the existing ramps really as soon as possible after we add that 3rd lane. So we're not redoing the whole interchange, it's just capacity through this area. With that, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Marrow to talk about our environmental commitments. All right, we'll excuse us while we swap out the mic.
Thank you. All righty. Thank you, Bill. We're doing a comprehensive environmental study of this project and its environmental impacts. I'll just run through the steps really quickly. Throughout the process, there's consultation with regulatory agencies. We have several public meetings, conversations with town planners, city planners, regional planning agencies. We have completed an inventory of the natural and historical socioeconomic resources. I'll run through those in a moment. We are currently determining the impacts of the various alternatives under consideration. That'll be put into an environmental study, which will be published sometime this summer. And there will be a public review and comment period for that environmental study, followed by a formal public hearing, and we'll consider comments at the public hearing as well. The range of resources looked at in the environmental study is quite broad. Wetlands, water quality, floodplains, historic and archaeological resources, social and economic conditions, resources, community facilities. We also look at secondary and cumulative impacts of the project. I'm going to be talking about a few resources that have notable impacts and I think will be of interest to the public. First, wetlands and waterways. We have approximately 2 acres of impacts to wetlands and waterways along the entire corridor. Most of those are very small fringes of wetlands and streams along the highway. The largest single impact is Pennachuck Brook, which is partly within Nashua. As Bill mentioned, we've taken various measures to try to minimize impacts to the water body there. The proposed new bridge alternative would widen the highway to the east and fill in approximately half an acre of that waterway. There's a few vernal pools, fringes of vernal pools that will be impacted by the project. None of those happen to be in Nashua. And several other wetlands have lesser impacts throughout the corridor. Water quality, the current water quality treatment requirements for stormwater runoff are fairly stringent. We are trying to to meet those requirements by constructing new extended detention basins along the corridor. Approximately 20 detention basins are proposed all along the widening area. They'll treat the existing pavement as well as the proposed new pavement, and we think will be a net improvement in the water quality of runoff from the roads. We're also attempting to minimize salt usage where possible, looking at management measures such as applying brine applications prior to storms to minimize salt usage. There are 4 conservation lands that may be affected by the project, 3 conservation lands, 3 or 4. Actually, we're looking at another one up in Bedford, aren't we? Yeah. There are 2 town-owned parcels in Merrimack, Birches Open Space and Indian Rock, where very small portions will be impacted. They're shown here. Dumpling Brook Wildlife Management Area in Merrimack, about 2/3 of an acre would be impacted for the construction of a detention basin, which we need to provide water quality treatment. And there's a 4th, what we think is a private conservation easement just recently enacted up in Bedford that may be affected by the project. We're looking into that. A noise study was done along the entire corridor from exit 8 in Nashua up to the 293 interchange, including the segments that were previously widened. We used the Federal Highway Administration's traffic noise model, which is the standard model for evaluating noise impacts and the effectiveness of noise barriers along highways. We identify, in running the traffic noise model, we make noise measurements on the ground at all of the neighborhoods along the corridor, not all of the individual residences, but at representative locations at all of the neighborhoods. We count traffic volumes, we plug the numbers into our model, and if the model spits out the same numbers as we measured on the ground, or similar numbers, then we know the model is accurate. And we did verify that the model appears to be accurate. We then run the model to look at noise impacts, which are noise levels of at least 66 decibels during the modeled peak traffic hour periods in the future design year when the traffic numbers are greatest. So it's essentially a worst case situation. If there are noise impacts, we will model noise barriers to determine whether they can be feasible and reasonable, and therefore can be proposed for construction. And John Evans is here from the Department of Transportation and can give you a more detailed perspective on what feasible and reasonable means. The bottom line is we found 6 noise barriers to be both feasible and reasonable. Those happen to be in the town of Merrimack. And I'll be glad to discuss those with you more if you'd like. Historic resources, that's something we're currently looking at. There's a number of structures that are over 50 years old and could be eligible for the National Register, and we're consulting with the appropriate agencies to determine whether those could be affected. There is an opportunity for individuals and organizations who have an interest in historic resources to become formally named consulting parties. Let us know after the meeting if that's something you would like to pursue, and we'd be glad to get you started with that process. And now I'd like to turn it over to Wendy Johnson, DOT Project Manager, who'll tell you about the outreach and other efforts.
Thank you, Jed. Okay. So the public outreach efforts for this project, this is a very large corridor project, and we're very interested in hearing what people have to say. I know on some projects we don't necessarily come out as much, but we're really trying to do a really big program with this project. We've already been out to several public officials meeting specifically with different municipalities. We've been meeting with public works directors. We're really trying to get a handle on what would be the best design for this particular project. We've also been doing consultation with our stakeholders. That's not just the public and public officials. It's also meeting with municipal waterworks like Pennachuck Waterworks. We've been meeting with them to decide the best alternative for the bridge. We've been meeting and discussing with the Manchester Boston Regional Airport. We've been talking with New Hampshire Transit Authority. We're looking for the best possible project that we can come up with. And that's why we're here at these public informational meetings. We want everybody to know about the project and for everybody to give us their input. And that's, as you came in tonight, you were handed a newsletter. And on the newsletter, there's a back here for some comments. I know some people don't really like to get up and talk in front of people, but we really encourage you to fill out these comments, and there's a comment box in the back. So if you have any suggestions that you don't want to say tonight, go ahead and fill these out. Another alternative is the project website. So that's the newsletter and the project website. The project website is listed on the bottom, and it will also be flashed up at the very end of the program, but it's the EverettTurnpikeWidening.com. And as Jennifer was indicating, if you email, you'll get me. I'll respond to you as soon as I can. And so we want to get those pieces of information. The website's also got some great information. After tonight's meeting, we'll be posting the plans you see around the room on the website. We'll be posting any information that we have as far as upcoming meetings, the current schedule. All that will be updated on the project. The project website doesn't just end at the design phase, though. That project website will continue throughout the design, and we'll post relevant information as we go. Design photos or construction photos, whatever we happen to have to kind of keep you still interested in the project. Agency consultation meetings, as Jed had indicated, we were looking at and discussing with the different agencies, natural resource agencies, cultural resource agencies. Like I said, we're really trying to make this the best project we can. And that public comment period on the environmental study, that's going to be 30 days. So what we'll do is 30 days before the public hearing, we'll post the environmental study right to that same website I've been talking about. We'll post that environmental study for comments for 30 days before the hearing. Then we'll go to a public hearing. Public hearing sort of concludes the preliminary design process, and we're in that preliminary design process right now. And that's all I'm going to kind of touch on for right now as far as where we're going to go there. Cost. Everybody wants to know about cost. This isn't free. Everybody knows that. I will tell you that there are no federal funds within the project. It's being done through the capital program, Turnpike capital program. So currently the funds you see on the screen, and I'll get into those, are Turnpike funds. We have not included any cost of any municipal funds in here, and so there's no municipal work being done on the project. For instance, if the town wanted to come in and they wanted to improve their own water line, that would be above and beyond these costs, and that would be a cost that a town would bear the cost of if we weren't impacting it. So if they wanted to upgrade something, that would be on their cost. So the engineering, the right-of-way, and the construction are the three costs we have listed up here, and a total cost of $133.8 million to complete all of this work. Engineering's at $13 million. Engineering pays for the preliminary engineering, the final engineering, any one of these studies we've been talking about, the noise evaluations, that's all part of that $13 million. The right-of-way component is estimated to be $6.8 million. And the right-of-way component includes going out, doing appraisals, purchasing the land, and any design work related to the right-of-way component. Construction costs, that's exactly what it's going to cost or not exactly what it's going to cost, it's an estimate. That's what it's going to cost to build the project itself. So the grand total, like I said, is $133.8 million. Process and schedule. So as I said, the kickoff to where we get to the next phase is at that environmental study, which is going to be published in the summer of 2018. From there, we get to that public hearing, which, as I said, concludes the preliminary design process, and we go through a whole series of steps after that point. We can have a public hearing, but we need to have a successful public hearing. That means we need to find necessity for the project. So we do a finding of necessity that becomes a record of decision that says, yes, there is a necessity to build this project, and everybody's on board with building it. Once we get that in our hands, we move forward with the final design process, and that's going to occur between 2018 and 2020, maybe 2021. I'll get into that in a second. We'll continue to have those public meetings. We'll continue to look for the input. We'll work with municipalities on any utility designs that need to be done, because we will likely impact utilities a lot more in Merrimack than in Nashua. And we'll be looking to execute agreements. So any utility agreement that happens has to be processed through us. And another thing that we'll need to do, Nashua doesn't have any, but we have sidewalks that we're constructing in Merrimack. And so they'll need to enter into a sidewalk agreement with us, meaning they'll maintain the sidewalks. One other thing that we need an agreement for with every municipality is a municipal work zone agreement, which means that when we come into town, we have the right to control traffic within whatever the area happens to be. So we'll be looking for the town of, all the towns and the city of Nashua to execute a municipal work zone agreement with us. During that final design process, we also work on right-of-way. So what happens then is we design what we need for right-of-way, and you've seen as you've walked around the room tonight, or maybe you can walk around after, there are boxes on the plan that show our potential right-of-way impacts. We'll go through the entire process, which includes an appraisal, includes somebody coming out looking at your property, talking to you, offering you funds for the project, and then we would eventually acquire the right-of-way. Once the right-of-way process is complete, or during that same step, we're working on the agency permitting, the state and federal approvals. We need a wetlands permit. As Jed indicated, we're impacting wetlands. We need a wetlands permit to achieve this project. So that's all happening during the final design. And then we get all of our ducks in a row and we're ready to go, and then we go ahead and we award and we bid and award the contract. That's when the true value of the contract will come out. Construction is likely to start in 2022 underneath the current funding structure. Some of you may be aware there's a House bill out there that's proposing to possibly move this contract up to 2021. So construction is actually anticipated to last from 2021, or it could be 2021 to 2025 or 2022 to 2026, depending on the outcome of that House bill. So one other thing that people are usually interested in is what's the phasing for the construction going to be like? Because we have so much area that we're trying to construct, one thing we can't do right now is say for certain which one of these contracts will go first, and we're not necessarily certain if it won't go is one contract. One thing we do know is the 2 overpass bridges need to be completed before the roadway underneath because the constriction, they're not wide enough. So Wire Road and Babusick Road could go as one contract, they could go as separate contracts, or they could go with that same middle segment. We haven't concluded that. One other thing we try to do when we advertise any of these projects is we try to minimize concurrent work right on top of each other so you're not in one huge construction zone. So that's one thing that we'll be considering as we start putting these projects in order and determining which project goes first. And that's all we have to say for this evening. I'd like to thank you. I know that's really important for you guys to come and to give up your evening is just incredible, and I really appreciate your coming. If you have any questions or comments, again, you can reach me at everett.turnpikewidening.com, and there's plenty of other information up there. So with that, I turn it back over to Jennifer.
Great. So I'm going to walk around with the microphone. If you're comfortable using it, that's great, so everyone can hear, and it's broadcast in a louder fashion on television. If you're not comfortable using the microphone, we're going to stay, and we will stay as long as it takes to answer any questions that you have, or if you want to go over some details on a particular parcel, we're very happy to stay. So it's your preference. So anyone have any questions? So I just ask that you hold the microphone about 1 inch from your mouth.
Okay. I'm Ernie Jetty. I'm a alderman from Ward 5 here in Nashua. And it looks to me like you're just starting with this project. Is it too late? Is it beyond the realm of possibility for you to consider adding a parallel bicycle path to this project so that people could either use it for recreation or commuting from Nashua to Manchester?
So we're about 20-30% design, offering suggestions at this point. It's not too late. As far as a parallel bicycle lane, we have not considered that. These are Turnpike funds. I could bring that back and we could look at that, but I'm not sure with a Turnpike funded contract if a bicycle lane would fall within that category, but I will certainly bring it back.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Gina Balkis, and I'm a resident of Nashua that near Exit 8. Could you explain a little bit more about the noise impact studies that you did specifically in the Nashua area?
So this is John Evans. John works for the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, and he is their noise professional. So John will answer all the questions relating to noise.
Hi. So basically, the approach, and I explained this to some of you. Basically, the approach that the department takes in determining where we would implement noise abatement measures is kind of it's a 3-tiered approach, where basically the first step is to determine if we have a project that could result in noise impacts. This is the type of project that would be has the potential to result in noise impacts, which is why we did a study of the entire project area to look for noise impacts. Then the next step is to identify where those noise impacts would be. Any noise impact is anything in excess of 66 decibels, which is the federal noise abatement criteria, which New Hampshire, we have adopted that in our policy. And that's essentially the limit at which human speech is you would have to speak up if I was talking to you at a normal distance between, between us or whatever. 66. So any home that is found to be to have noise levels either under the existing conditions, which are those which exist now during the worst case noise hour, that would be the time of day. Usually it's the daily commuting traffic. It wouldn't be the time of day where or the conditions that exist, say, on Friday of 4th of July or something like that, because that doesn't happen very often. It's the typical time when those higher noise levels would occur. So it's generally your AM or PM commuting times. If under the existing or the future build conditions, so if you were to build the project under the traffic conditions that exist 20 years into the future, if we determine that there's noise impacts within a neighborhood, we would look at abatement measures. Now, I'm sure the question is how do you determine what those noise impacts are? What we use is the federal traffic noise model. The model itself allows us to put in those kind of worst case scenarios that don't exist yet, that would exist at some point in the future. It also allows us to put in features such as a noise barrier or those kinds of things that we simply we need to make a determination as to whether or not they meet our criteria or not, and we need all the information. So that noise model is one that's it's produced by the Federal Highway Administration. It's required for use by all 50 states, and what we do in order to make sure that model is accurately predicting noise levels is we'll take select noise measurements at in neighborhoods throughout the corridor, and we'll take those measurements at the same time as taking traffic counts along the highway. The information gathered during those measurements, we put that into the model, the traffic volumes and the existing conditions, and that gives us, we then can look at those and compare those to the measurements that we took, and if those are within about 2 to 3 decibels, we consider the model to be accurately predicting noise levels within the corridor, and then we can make the design changes that are necessary to provide us with adding the additional traffic that would exist 20 years into the future, that kind of stuff. Because again, we know that the model is accurately predicting those noise levels. Then what we would do is, so when we determine that there's a noise impact within a neighborhood, we then, we would look at noise abatement that would mitigate for that impact. Once one home within a neighborhood is impacted by noise, then we're moving on to the next step of determining whether or not the abatement measured is both considered feasible and reasonable. Feasible refers to can it be built? Is there some feature there that just makes it too difficult for us to build it, or the environmental impacts are too great such that we couldn't build the abatement measure? Usually feasibility, a wall would be infeasible if it has to be too tall, such that it still isn't providing benefit. A benefit would be anything in excess of 5 decibels. That's about what's considered to be a noticeable difference in noise. So then the model also allows us to put in a barrier, which you've seen the barriers. There's multiple barriers in Nashua along the side of the highway. Those are the types of barriers that we're simulating in the model. Basically, the model allows us to put those in, see what the benefits are of that barrier. Any home that gets a 5 decibel reduction or more would be considered benefited in terms of whether or not the wall is constructed or not. We take, when we're designing that barrier, we take the dimensions of the barrier, the length, the height, and we move those around, determine what the optimal barrier is, which would essentially be the least barrier with the most benefit. And the intent behind that is then we're able to determine, okay, what is that? How many? What is the length and height of that barrier? That allows us to determine a square footage of the entire surface area, protective surface area of the barrier. And then you divide that by the number of homes that get a benefit. We're not talking about just those that are impacted. We've moved the next step beyond that. Those homes that are benefited would be, we calculate those. That would be any home that gets a 5 decibel reduction or more. We divide the overall square footage of the barrier by the number of homes that get a benefit, and that gives us a square foot per benefited receptor, or home, basically. If that number is in excess of 1,500 square feet per benefited receptor, then the barrier, unfortunately, is considered to be unreasonable. Essentially, it's too extensive without enough benefit, and therefore it doesn't meet the department's reasonableness criteria.
So can you restate that what you just said? If it's 1,500?
If it exceeds 1,500 square feet per benefited receptor, it's essentially too extensive for us to consider it to be reasonable to build the barrier. And these requirements are spelled out in the department's noise policy, which is consistently applied, allows us to consistently apply this approach across the state. And these are the decisions. This criteria allows us, again, to consistently apply this across the state. And then if for some reason the project, basically, we're not allowed to construct noise abatement that would not meet the department's, the requirements that are found in the department's noise policy, because we've been given the authority essentially by the state legislature to spend mitigation funds in association with this project that are in accordance with the department's noise policy. So anything that wouldn't be in accordance with that, we can't spend it as in association with this project. So that's
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I have just an additional question.
Sure.
So as you mentioned, it would, right now, the plant only has noise abatement in Merrimack. So and obviously those of us who live in Nashua have some concerns about noise. So will you be able to share with us what your testing revealed in the Bowers Pond neighborhood, relative to, what the data showed relative to decibel levels?
Sure.
And square footage per receptor?
Sure. So I assume, I actually don't know that, I assume the Bowers Pond neighborhood is the Tinkers. Right where Wendy's pointing, right there?
here?
Yep, okay. That is, so in that area, we determined the optimal noise barrier to be 17 feet tall, 1,770 feet long, which equates to 28,360 square feet of protective surface, basically. That would provide benefits for 8 residences within that neighborhood, which comes out to a square foot per benefited receptor of 3,545 square feet, which again, the criteria that it must be under is 1,500 square feet per benefited receptor. So essentially this barrier is more than double the size that would be considered reasonable in accordance with our policy. I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm gonna move the microphone over here. So, ma'am, did you have your question answered acceptably for right now, or we can stay later and talk about this in a lot more detail?
No, I think that obviously there's more homes than just 8 homes in that neighborhood, and certainly I think all the homes are impacted by noise. It would be interesting to better understand the decibel ratings in that neighborhood, and I think that might be something that the department might want to have a meeting just with our homeowners association, to have a homeowners association where we could discuss that and have some local public officials there as well, just to deal with that, because obviously we're taking up time on, from others, but I mean, I think it's a concern that we would like to have a better understanding of what the data showed. I mean, I get that.
I mean, I can.
Well, I want to move on to further question. But the noise study will be posted on the website when it's complete, and it will be extremely detailed, and we'll have very specific information about the decibel levels that residents will be reduced or there'll be an increase. So that will be available for public comment. And I just want to get a few more questions and.
Yeah.
So that'll be basically summarized in the department's environmental assessment. So the results of that will be summarized in that. The modeling results themselves are, I mean, it's a computer program that it's not something that anybody can just open up. It doesn't. So, like I said, it'll be summarized in the environmental assessment, and that's what the determination, this along with all the other environmental impacts are what's the decision is being made that the department's using to make a decision on to move forward with those environmental impacts. This is one of the environmental impacts that are all summarized in the environmental assessment.
So just to know, the noise study is not publicly available yet, but Wendy Johnson and John Evans are available to continually answer questions and to help point you in the right direction until that full report is available for the public, and then you can formally comment on that. Okay, anyone else?
Atlan Schmidt, Nashua. Today, the highway in Merrimack in the mornings is clearly failing. In the afternoons, it's clearly failing. When you've done all these improvements, what do you expect the quality of service to be at that point, and taking it a few years in the future?
Here, I'll come up to the front. As part of this project, and we didn't really touch on it too much here, there was a traffic study that dictated the volume, or didn't dictate the volumes, it studied the existing volumes and did predictions on future volumes. That traffic study shows that after we build the third lane, there is still congestion in some areas, but it did not show that a fourth lane was warranted. And I guess when I say I want to qualify congestion in some areas, it's at peak traffic hours, which is the commuting hours. But as I had pointed out in my earlier presentation, it's currently operating at a level of service D and will be moving towards an F. So the traffic study shows that as traffic grows, we're looking out 20 years from the end of construction, which is in 2024, 5. So 20 years after that, it does get back to, and this is off my memory of what's in the report, it does get back towards a level of D-type service, but that is 20 years out. In 2024, I think we were looking at level of service of B, and I'd have to look that up and but yeah, and it is by road segment, it's by exits and stuff like that. So it does vary along the corridor, but it does improve the existing conditions.
Anyone else? Absolutely.
My name is Steve Dukran. I'm from Nashua. A question about a noise study. Does the department, does the department ever go back, say, during the life or the end of life of the design life of the highway to check to see how if their model was effective or accurate?
Do we go back and look at it after the fact? Not really. I mean, this is a federal. Yeah, I'll move up front so that everybody's not looking backwards. But it's a federal highway noise model. So the accuracy and honestly, they've been using this since the 80s, and they've continually updated it for there's various new versions of it. But it's the accuracy of the model is it's pretty good. It's really the only tool out there for measuring noise impacts on a highway facility like this. So typically, no, we wouldn't go back out in 20 years to relook at it. But it has proven to be very accurate. There's multiple studies that have shown it to be accurate. So, again, we typically wouldn't go back to look at something that we believe is to be accurate. So.
Here you go.
And the reason why I'm asking that is that I'm aware of several neighborhoods in Nashua that have gone through the expansion in the 90s, and they're disappointed that the amount of noise they experience now at their homes. Even some locations where walls were installed, the walls aren't apparently doing their jobs. But other than that, I'm also the city engineer for the city of Nashua, so I'm speaking on behalf of Public Works. Talking about what happened in the 90s, we are very well aware of the problems that we experience here in Nashua traffic-wise. And Wendy mentioned the municipal agreement regarding work zone. So I'd like to know what would be the limits of that work zone where you try to manage. I believe it's for managing traffic.
So for Nashua, the only thing we're going to try to manage is the stuff on the FE Everett. The municipal work zone agreements become more important on the towns like Merrimack, where we're actually impacting the side roads. So there won't be any side road involvement here. It'll just be, I believe the policy that we have is 500 feet beyond this line on the FE Everett.
Okay, because I like to extend, on behalf of the city, that we do look at an agreement that will include managing traffic, because construction like we experienced in the 90s backed up for miles into Massachusetts, such that people were actually getting onto Route 113 in Lowell, all to avoid coming into the southern part of Nashua. And it choked up our local roads, our local arterials, Main Street, all suffered. So if we can figure out a way to help manage Nashua's traffic during that construction, plan ahead, I think that'll benefit everybody.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point. And one thing that I didn't mention is part of that construction cost, that $114 million construction cost, part of that is actually going to be spent on something that we call a smart work zone. So what the smart work zones do for, I'm trying to pin this up so I don't keep shaking. Is that better? So what the smart work zones do is the smart work zones are similar to what you see on I-93 where you're driving down the road and it says so many minutes, so many miles. We keep track of that. We're going to post where there's blasting delays and stuff like that. So you'll see those sort of things. And we found that when we use those smart work zones, we actually keep the motorist on the travel way because he knows it's only going to be 5 minutes or 7 minutes or a 2-minute extra trip this time. So we will be using those, and those will be employed at key locations. We haven't done the design yet. But for instance, when we've done projects on other interstate facilities, sometimes we do put them on some side roads. We put them prior to exits so people can make the decision to stay on the roadway where they should be. It's a good point, though.
I just have a follow-up regarding the noise ordinances that you have, and I think Steve and I are aware of the same situation. When were those last updated to the numbers you're using now?
I'm sorry, what?
When
updated?
when was the information you're using now in your noise studies? When was that last updated?
So this uses traffic data from, the existing traffic conditions were 2016, and the future conditions are 2044. So basically, I mean, that's the current traffic data that the engineers, the highway engineers are using for this project.
The noise information?
So this is a new study for this project.
No, I guess I'm asking about the cutoff criteria
Oh,
that
the
you're
criteria?
using, greater than 1,500,
Oh,
right?
I see what you're saying.
When was that last updated? Because I believe Steve and I are talking about the construction and the noise resulting from the barriers or not being addressed by the barriers when the last widening of the Everett was done. So I'm just wondering if the numbers you're using now have been updated since the last widening,
So
which would have been prior to me arriving here, so like prior to 95.
So the department's original noise policy was developed in 1996. So the barriers that were built in Nashua were actually basically in accord, they were built about that time frame. A few of them were a few years earlier, but they were using the same criteria, that we just hadn't formalized it by then. We've consistently, in the past, we've used the first noise policy utilized a cost per square foot to to cost per benefited receptor calculation. And then the second noise policy that we had was in 2011, which essentially was we were mandated by the Federal Highway Administration to update that policy as a result of the costs changing. So the costs, again, so what we did was we essentially had to figure out what the new costs per square foot were, and then we also have to adjust the benefits per receptor to the same amount. All of that hinged upon the same square foot per benefited receptor, which is why in 2016, when we updated the policy the last time, we utilized a square foot per benefited receptor. So essentially, what I'm saying, and I may not be saying this in a way that you guys are completely following, and I apologize for that, but essentially, the number has always been 1,500 square feet per benefited receptor when you do the calculations from each of our past policies. So we've consistently applied this same criteria throughout the entire time that the department has been building noise barriers throughout the entire state. So I hope that answers your question, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Great question. Okay, coming on over your way.
Thank you, Marty Jack. I represent District 36, and I sit on Public Works and Highways. We just had a good discussion on sound walls in the committee. Am I correct in understanding that, number one, this was updated in 2016, and number two, these are actually, this plan is not pulled out of the air, it's signed off by Federal Highway, and it reflects national standards for sound wall criteria?
Correct. So basically what we have, our noise policy was written. It's our answer to the Federal Highway Administration mandates that in order to spend federal dollars for highway construction, we must have a noise policy, and they give us certain parameters that the policy must identify. One of them is the feasibility and reasonableness criteria. Well, how do you make those determinations? We as a state are able to set that limit. And we've set that limit and that's where the reasonableness criteria, which is one of those, is set at 1,500 square feet. So it's essentially the department's response to the federal mandates. There's certain things in there that we cannot change. The Federal Highway Administration has basically said, those are your limits. Now, all this having been said, it's important to note the difference between and this is, Wendy mentioned that this is a Turnpike funded project. We as a department feel that it's important to consistently apply our criteria across the entire state, whether or not it's funded through federal dollars or through state Turnpike funds. In this particular case, this is state Turnpike funds, but we're still utilizing the same noise policy, which is used for both those federal dollars or a state-funded turnpike project like this. So essentially, this project has the noise abatement has been designed in accordance with the federal standards.
Good answer. Have anything else? Okay. So you had a question, sir.
Yeah, I just want to be clear about the noise explanation we've heard. It sounds like a cost-benefit analysis for deciding whether or not to spend money. It doesn't sound like. It doesn't at all sound like. Are the people going to be satisfied with this? Which is a different question. And
Right. So I guess if I'm understanding your
basically, if we spend money to get a particular reduction, there's it's a function of the money you spend to get a certain reduction, and if you can't get the reduction you want within the amount of money you're willing to spend, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's not a matter of so your question, I'm not sure if you.
Somebody is frustrated and you can't build a wall that's going to create the result somebody wants. They're impacted to some degree that they're not satisfied with. That really doesn't help.
You really need to use the microphone. I can't hear a thing you're saying.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right. I just wanted to make the point that I think you're doing a great explanation of the cost-benefit analysis. I don't think it's not something that says, and at the end of this, the person behind this wall will be satisfied.
Correct. I mean, we're acknowledging the fact that there
If
are
it's-
noise
if-
impacts within
Right. If it's not financially.
this neighborhood. It's just a matter of it doesn't meet the departments. We're trying to make sure that we spend our money wisely and that we haven't we're not going above and beyond the limits that we've set, to be consistently applied across the state.
Okay. Basically. Great. My real question.
Okay.
Had to do, I believe it would be with environmental impact, because I'm concerned, you've spent a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, you've alluded to the idea of what traffic would be expected to be in the future with the construction and assuming it went ahead. I'm curious about what if it doesn't? And I'm interested in the traffic implications through the city of Nashua proper, where we have a number of closely spaced exits. And, naively, when I look at the situation of this narrow area, it actually seems to me that it serves a useful purpose, that it actually throttles traffic flow into the Nashua area where we have a lot of exits and a lot of activity. And I'm kind of concerned as I look at this that you're going to spend a lot of money and just move the problem somewhere else. Not expecting to get an answer to that question, but I'm curious as to whether the impact study is going to look at, essentially both of these scenarios, the scenario of build, the scenario of don't build, and what the implications are down through Nashua proper. And I'm sure that the people up in Manchester have the same concern because it's the mirror image of the issue.
We have been coordinating with the local regional planning commissions. That's kind of what you're getting at is basically, something along the lines of secondary impacts. Basically, I think is what you're talking about. Those are basically that if when you're under various build or no build scenarios, what does this do to the surrounding traffic and development and all those kinds of things? We've coordinated with the regional planning commissions, and we've also, a lot of the traffic models have included those kinds of projections of what's going on as far as the development and various population trends in the area and that kind of stuff, which will be included in the final environmental study, basically those types of assessments.
Well, will the environmental study come out and say, here's the traffic, here are the implications of traffic through Nashua in the scenario of this thing being built during, say, peak rush hour in the morning, and here's the scenario of it not being built?
I don't know.
Because that gets to the question of whether there's value in doing this thing. I mean, you're going to spend $100 million. I don't think Atlant will be any happier if he's waiting in traffic up in Manchester.
So I have a question. Do you mean we understand the no build, but you're asking, will the traffic impact during construction or after construction? Okay.
When you're done, when you have the roadway of your dreams here, after you just move the traffic somewhere else.
So I'm not clear if you're asking about the impact on the highway or the impact on the other roads in Nashua or the.
I'm actually asking on the highway proper.
On the highway proper.
Because I see both sections. I see the section through Manchester proper with a lot of tightly spaced exits, a lot of activity there. A similar situation down here in Nashua, and I'm concerned that you're going to spend $100 million or whatever it is, cleaning this section of road up only to create equally unacceptable problems somewhere else.
So the three segments of road are currently bottlenecks. And we do look at the build and the no build conditions. And if we follow the no build scenario, they will remain bottlenecks. If we do the build condition, they will not be bottlenecks. There will be a bottleneck in Manchester as there is now, but we don't believe that removing these three bottlenecks will make Manchester worse. It'll just continue to be a bottleneck because it's 2 lanes in each direction. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I don't maybe, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm being kind of particular.
Yeah, let me just say, what I think you're asking is, okay, everybody, you got now 3 lanes that are going to go all the way north to Manchester. Yes, when you get to Manchester and it goes back to 2 lanes, it's going to back up just like it does right below 11, for instance. Now,
Right.
I mean, yes. So the short answer to your question is yes. Going the other direction, will there be more cars through Nashua because now you're delivering 3 lanes of traffic where there's only 2 now? Sure, but you've got more lanes in Nashua. Now, I don't know that that's not part of the analysis to go down through all the exits in Nashua to say, okay, now that there's 3 lanes, it's delivering 3 lanes of traffic, is it going to be worse at, any of those exits? Maybe one of those, maybe. I mean, that analysis is not part of this project.
Yeah, I'm not asking for the analysis as it goes off the highway. I'm still asking.
No, I'm saying on the highway. No, there has not been an analysis south of this portion to say, it's going to be worse at any particular exit, whether it's Somerset Parkway or even further south.
Because if I was, I'm not a road engineer, but if I was going to do this build no build analysis, I'd be asking one of the questions I'm kind of interested in is, okay, I'm traveling, say, from Manchester to Lowell or Burlington, and once you do this, am I just sitting in traffic somewhere else?
Maybe.
Yeah.
The short answer to that is maybe.
If I don't get there sooner, maybe $100 million is a lot of money.
Well, okay, but hold on a minute. See, here's the thing. These 3 sections have not been done up until this point. So you have the problem now. So it would be wonderful if, as a state, we could afford to fix everything along the whole corridor when we do it all at once, but we can't.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking.
So yes, you will deliver more to the portions above and beyond this depending on which way you're going.
Will the impact statement talk about?
No. No, because it's not part of this project. The thing that's going to happen in Manchester, the Granite Street Bridge, for instance, is built to handle 6 lanes of traffic right now, but there's only 2 lanes across it. So again, there's going to be pieces where it needs to be improved. The project that you just saw through the mill yard bridges, those bridges have all been widened to take the additional lanes in the future. Now, if you look closely, some of those sections actually have 3 lanes, but it's not completed yet.
Yeah.
And that's part of the plan for DOT going forward to go ahead and do that at some point as the funding becomes available.
Yeah,
For instance, the Bow Concord section, all the way up in Concord and Bow, is only 2 lanes. That's another project that's on the Turnpike plan to be done in the future.
I'm not asking for a full-blown, state line to Concord project, okay? But I am asking that, in the wider context of that interstate highway system, when you build this, what is the real upside for Joe Driver? And
well, the upside is to fix it here. I mean,
I can add to that a little bit. I think a little bit along the lines of your question, there is the assumption that there will be more traffic if we build this. Now, when the traffic is modeled, it looks at the growth of the traffic throughout. So there is going to be growth whether we build this or not. So the level of service or the flowing of traffic along the road will get worse whether we build it or not. So that's just one thing. Building this doesn't necessarily suck in more people from other places. We are not creating a destination that people want to travel to. So if people are going to Manchester or going to Concord or going to the White Mountains to ski, they are going to go anyways. So the traffic, yes, it will increase, but it's going to increase without this road, whether we widen this road or not. And then, there are studies that were done for I-93. Some of the studies said, well, you build it, it's going to increase faster. And some of the studies said, well, it's not going to increase faster. And the whole economic development and growth of New Hampshire really drives that much more than adding a lane on this highway. So with that said, it's a very valid question, but the analysis of that, there's so many factors that go into that. My second part of my answer here would be that we did look at congestion along this roadway and the cost to the public to travel this roadway. If you sit in traffic, you're consuming more fuel. If you sit in traffic, you're wasting more of your time, which is money to almost everybody. So the study that was done looks at that and says, okay, if I can get from Nashua to Manchester 5 minutes quicker and there's 60 to 70,000 cars a day, that is a huge savings in personal time, in fuel cost, and then there's also the added benefit that a car traveling at 60, 70 miles an hour is a lot more efficient than a car sitting in traffic. So there's a significant reduction in emissions. So a much better impact to the highway. So while your question is very valid, I think it would be very, very hard to analyze without looking at the whole state of Massachusetts, and how that traffic would shift all around if we built 6-8 lanes here or something. Yeah. So it's a tough one. But what we do know is that we will save the public money individually by allowing free-flowing traffic, and we will have less overall environmental impacts.
I hope you're right.
So as we said before, any issues that you really want a lot more detail with, we'll stay as long as it takes. But I do want to take a couple new questions. And you had your hand up, right? There you go, sorry.
It's a 3-part question. how many round trips per day does the highway currently carry? That's the first part. The second part is, how many trips could be averted if we aggressively promoted commuter and busing systems? And how many trips per day could be averted if we aggressively promoted a railroad from Concord into Lowell and Boston?
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That is a very tough three-part question. I will give. How many round trips a day are there? The traffic volume does vary from Nashua to Manchester, but it's between 60 to 70,000 what we would call ADT, average daily traffic. So that is a bi-directional flow. So that adds north and southbound traffic. So 30 to 35,000 going north, 30 to 35,000 going south. Now, depending on where you are on the highway, there may be more people from Merrimack going south to Nashua or further to Boston, or if you're northern end of Manchester, or sorry, northern end of Merrimack, you may be traveling up to Manchester for work. So depending on where you are, the traffic is different, but roughly 60 to 70,000 cars a day. We did not study the impact or the potential reduction of traffic into adding commuter buses or trains into this mix, or park and rides. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have a comment, sir?
Yes, I'm with Nashville Regional Planning Commission, and our Transportation Advisory Committee did ask us to take a look at the impact of reduction of traffic as a result of rail. It was a low figure, the couple percent, 3%. If you give me your email address, I'll be happy to send you the exact results. We didn't look at buses, but it would be low. Remember, the rail impacts people to Boston pretty much exclusively, so it's a rather low percentage of the total traffic. But I will be happy to send you the results.
Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Anyone else? There's no bad or wrong question. Because like I said, we want to try to deliver the best product that we can. So this has been a great dialogue and excellent questions. And thank you so much. All right, so if anybody wants to stay, we will be here and we can speak privately. Thank you all for giving up your night. It really means a lot to us.